right, then you will arrive at your destination.
Welcome back to another exciting episode. Today we are at Mystic Seaport in Connecticut. So come along with me and see what we can see. There's a lot here to explore, so this might be another two-parter. We'll see. After paying your admission and exiting the main building, you will find yourself outside in the over 90-year-old museum, where you will see the start of the seafaring village, which we'll get to in the next episode. But here's a sneak peek, including the handicapped accessible bathrooms. At the admissions desk, you can also buy a seaside tour, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And you can do shipyard tours, which we did partake, and it was very good. Of course, in this episode, we're here to see sea vessels, boats, ships, and stuff, including this reconstruction of a Viking set, which is 100% seaworthy and is going under reconstruction. Many of the ships you see currently in dry dock was made possible by bringing them on land via this ship lift, including the Royan. Most people, when they see this plain-looking Eastern rig dragger that was built in 1947 by Newbert and Wallace in Thompson, Maine, they don't realize that it fished the New England waters for about 50 years. And is one of the last surviving examples of the efficient diesel-powered offshore fishing boats that replaced these sailing schooners. The idea was to use the diesel engine to reach the fishing grounds and to drag a huge conical net, which they called an otter trawl, along the seabed. Here you even see the fabulous U-1 Miss Budweiser, which set a world record for the 2.5 mile course at 170.471 miles per hour. It was done on the Columbia River in Tri-Cities, Washington in 1999. Next to the shipyard, you will find the L.A. Dunton. Now, it does have a huge hole in the side that they're eventually going to make into a lift for handicap accessibility, but for now, we gotta take the stairs. When you reach the top of the stairs, you'll see that the boat is enclosed so that they can do the renovation in all sorts of weather. Kind of looks like an ark. So we just piled in 2 by 2. It's really neat exploring the top deck of the ship, and it has beautiful views, as you see. Now to tell you a little bit about this ship. The L.A. Dunton is a fishing schooner which stands a little over 123 feet and is one of the few remaining vessels of her type in the country. She was mainly used as a fishing and freighting vessel and was acquired by this museum in 1963. Soon afterwards, the restoration was undertaken. The L.A. Dunton was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1993. By the way, you can also explore her lower decks, but you gotta watch your head. Here you see the Emma C. Berry, which was built just 3 miles downriver in 1866 and is the only survivor of a small reliable fishing vessel type that once ranged the coast from Maine to Florida. The small boat exhibit was really neat, and you learned a lot, including this. One very interesting thing about this catboat is the steering wheel was in the back, because they switched over from a lever like that. This ship, called the Joseph Conrad, was built in 1882 in Copenhagen, Denmark, and was considered a training ship, but it was originally named the George Stage. This iron-hulled vessel sailed the Baltic and North Seas on 6-month training cruises, carrying about 80 cadets at a time. In 1905, it sank in a collision, losing 22 young men, but it was raised and repaired after that disaster. In 1934, an Australian sailor bought the ship and renamed it Joseph Conrad. During World War II, this ship was used to train U.S. Merchant Marine personnel in Florida. And as you see here, and I kind of mentioned earlier, you can do a seaside tour of the museum with a little extra donation. Oh, you are in for a treat. Here's the Charles W. Morgan. In my personal opinion, this is the creme de la creme of the sea vessel portion of this tour. This vessel was built and launched in New Bedford in 1841 and is the last of an American whaling fleet that numbered more than 2,700 vessels over 150 years. During its personal 80-year, you got that right, 80-year whaling career, the Morgan embarked on 37 voyages. It was built for cargo capacity, not speed. As you step onto the ship, be very careful, because that first step could be a little tricky. Remember, the boat is on water and is moving back and forth, so that means so is the gangplank. Known as a lucky ship, the Morgan successfully navigated crushing northern ice, hostile South Sea natives, and countless storms. Yet throughout her career, she returned a healthy profit for her owners. Now that luck continued in her retirement from whaling in 1921. After a brief movie career, she was acquired by Colonel Edward Green, who was a wealthy investor who put her on display at his waterfront estate near New Bedford. After surviving a hurricane in 1938, she was brought to Mystic Seaport, where you see her now. Since then, she became a National Historic Landmark, and more than 20 million people have walked her decks since her arrival in Mystic Seaport Museum. You are more than welcome to explore the top deck, and you are very much encouraged to go downstairs to the lower deck. However, if you are a tall person with a bad back, you will be cramped because you will have to scrunch over in quite a few places. But if you can handle it, it's definitely worth the trip. at Mystic Seaport Museum, they not only have lots of guided tours, but they also have, included in the price, all kinds of demonstrations throughout the day. And we were lucky enough to have one on the Morgan about the same time that we toured the ship. So let's go upstairs and see what they got for us.
Lift up the ends in what's called a hawksbill. It's just a tagline, no hitch, and then a bowling. Kind of Caribbean rhythm. I was in Mobile Bay, screwing cotton all of the day, but I'm throwing sugar in the hole below, below, below. Oh, hey, oh, below.
Enough!
Before they had, say, fresh water. The tallyman, tally me banana. Daylight come and me wanna go home.
Enough!
That song, as Hannah said, that song which many of you may recognize, that was actually originally a labor, and those people were fighting for jobs because that would never come back. All those finger hairs sticking out. Ready? Henry, you owe me. Pay me my money down. Pay me. You might have to push it around that long. There we go. So this shows you how.
Oh, wow, that was so cool. But unfortunately, we have to go to our next ship. So come along with us and see what we can see. And that brings us to the Firefighter Fireboat, which was built by United Shipyards at Staten Island, New York in 1938. Although known simply as the Fighter, it was also the queen of the Fire Department New York Marine Unit Fleet, a gallant ship awardee, and a National Historic Landmark vessel. For a period of 65 years, it held the title of the world's largest and most powerful fireboat, and it was on hand at the World Trade Center attacks.